How is everybody loving London's Calling right now? That is good to hear. I've just spilt Coke all over my hands. Okay, they're just getting my presentation and doing it at the back because my laptop doesn't work for some reason against your connector here. But anyway, while they're figuring that out, I'm going to start off because why not? We've already a couple of minutes in. Okay, so my name is Pindar, and I have been on a bit of, which is actually really convenient. Sorry, because the first slide I've just realized with the, the title slide isn't the London's Calling slide. Amanda would kill me and Louise, so all good. Anyway, so yeah, my name is Pindar, and I've been on a kind of bit of a journey. I started in the Salesforce ecosystem like 14 years ago, and since then I've been kind of moving through different roles, becoming an architect, working with loads of other architects, and last couple of years, been doing this podcast, Salesforce Posse podcast, and kind of chatting with other architects and people in the ecosystem. And to be honest, it was a very selfish endeavor, because if you want to go and talk to somebody and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you for an hour on the phone, is that okay?" They'll be like, no. "Oh, can you talk on a podcast for an hour?" And they're like, "Yeah." So it's a great way of me picking their brains and finding more about how architects tick, yeah? And there's some, so does anyone know Gemma, blessed? Yeah, and Keir Bowden, and yeah, some really awesome architects. And I've kind of interviewed them on the podcast. Oh, and also, Spotify, for some reason, has said it's the top 10% most watched podcast on Spotify. It's Salesforce. What? I literally had to double check, and 15% most followed podcast, which is quite bizarre. Anyway, so what I want to talk to you really is about the 10 habits of highly successful architects, okay? So how these people have kind of learnt their craft, and what I've kind of tried to figure out is what makes them successful, okay? And luckily, I've got a bit of paper. I wrote my 10 habits down just in case. Okay, well, when it comes up, it'll come up. Cool. And the first one is they have a great sense of wanting to listen, yeah? They're constantly wanting to kind of find out more and really ask those questions, really kind of amazing questions that just promote more conversation to really get to the kind of root kind of problems that the customer may have, or even in their own organization, to find out what is going on. And with this listening, I think that maybe if the slide comes up, I'll keep winging it. And now with listening, it is a kind of bit of an art form. And I kind of have a rule in kind of my consultancy sometimes that if don't see that slide. I'll skip that one. Oh yeah, I was going to skip this, but then Louise said I've got 40 minutes, so I kind of added it back in again. But I have. Anybody know what that Lego piece is? It's my 30-second, it's not even 30 seconds, like 5 seconds claim to fame. I was Fred Weasley's stunt double in one of the Harry Potter films. But yeah, so I kind of do kind of cool kind of stuff. Yeah, Salesforce Posse. Yeah, so it's basically, talk to loads of cool people, as well as Amanda's there, Tarek, and the future of Salesforce careers. That was a good one. But yeah, Gemma and Keir, both kind of awesome people. And 10 posts, yes, skip. Okay, yeah. So, what is an architect, right? Now, I think some people think of an architect as something like this, right? It's like people that write lots of diagrams and do loads of crazy things like that. And actually, what I kind of think of architecture is a bit more like this. So, enterprise architecture being that kind of whole wrap around, and then you've got business architecture, which is kind of the business side of governance, strategy, and aligning kind of the goals of the organization to everything. And then information systems architecture, which kind of comprises of application and data architecture, and then the kind of physical layer, I suppose, at the bottom, which is your kind of your technical, physical cabling and stuff like that. And I kind of put this kind of security architecture all the way down the side. And dependent on different organizations, they've got kind of more or less of this. And one of the really bizarre things is why Salesforce doesn't go more into the business architecture generally in everything they do, because when you bring Salesforce in, it kind of disrupts the way people work, right? And it might be suddenly their work becomes way more efficient and they need less people. Or, and so actually that is a really important side of Salesforce, yeah? And I think this is one of the misconceptions of architecture where it's technical, deep knowledge of Salesforce, when actually I think, well, no, having a real clear understanding of the business is really valuable as well. Now, there are a number of different frameworks. Has anybody heard of the Zachman framework? No, so kind of the Zachman framework really asks what, how, where, who, when, and why, yeah? And it kind of looks at it, it's kind of a simple model of kind of looking at like C-level execs and how you talk to them and asking them what, how, where, and why, and then trickling all the way down the organization to kind of really understand where we are and where we want to go. And then there's another framework which is quite common, which is this TOGAF 9. Have you seen this? So yeah, so some people say that, yeah, it's good to know this if you want to go to your CTA certified technical architect board exam and all the kind of jazz. But this is a lot more prescriptive. The previous one's kind of a lighter framework. And it kind of goes around this kind of ADM model of understanding the business, setting the architectural vision. Where are we on business architecture, information architecture, blah, blah, blah. Where do we want to get to? And these kind of iterative approaches to then realizing that. And this is another kind of way of looking at what architecture is. We had traditional IT, right, where we had architects in all these different kind of areas, domains. But as we kind of move more to the right, Salesforce manages all the IP stack and all the networking and everything we don't need to worry about, right? Or maybe do, I don't know. And so Salesforce is more in that PaaS, serverless SaaS kind of world, right, depending on what you're using and how you're using it. But still, what is a Salesforce architect, right? It's still, it's traditional IT. Okay, SaaS, if the provider's doing it all, well, what's a Salesforce architect? And so I think of an architect in the Salesforce world as, so all architecture is design, but not all design is architecture. Does that make sense? Yeah? And I always think that Salesforce architecture is all the things that are going to be hard or costly to change in the future. And that is it, right? So it's design decisions that are hard to change in the future, right? And that is it, right? So, who here calls themselves an architect? Cool. Who's created an object in Salesforce? Right. So if I create an object in Salesforce, I put a load of fields in it, I relate it to loads of things, I put a load of flows on that, maybe some reports and some dashboards. Maybe I'll do an integration to that object as well. Okay, how easy is it to change that object? Not easy at all, right? So, if you've created an object, are you an architect? Or should you know that if that is a right way of creating that object, right? Because the implications in the future could be that if you got that wrong, it's going to be a big, costly change in the future, right? So this is kind of what I call is my, actually I could have the slides up here as well at the same time so I know what I'm doing because I haven't got my notes now. Now that's ingenious. The power of technology. Yeah, so that's what I kind of think of what architecture is. And so the first one that I kind of mentioned about is listening, right? Being able to listen, but really understanding the customer and really understanding their pains, their problems, and their ultimate goals for what they want to achieve out of Salesforce, and kind of really understanding what they do. And what I do, which I don't think I mentioned, was for some people who haven't got Salesforce, I just ban the use of mentioning Salesforce, right? If they don't have Salesforce, I want to listen to the customer. I want to figure out what they're doing. I'm working in this new organization that wants to get Salesforce. I really want to understand them, and I want to completely disconnect Salesforce from the picture, right? Because I want to know what their pains are. I want to know what their goals are. I don't want them saying, oh, but we need an object for this. I'm like, do you really? What is the actual objective that you're trying to get to? What's the problem you're trying to solve? So my next one is, Amanda would love me for this, thinking in layers, right? I always got this thing of the architects just think in layers, yeah? And so if you think of the Salesforce 360, I kind of think of this as the level 0 top layer of what Salesforce does. That basically says everything about what Salesforce does, doesn't it? But I kind of flatten it all out, and I do this. I say this is the 360 degree, but level 1, right? So this is because this is really great for selling Salesforce, because you can understand the whole picture. But then I go, well, actually, that's level 1. I can clearly describe the different areas of Salesforce. But actually, we go down the next level, I can actually now start describing the functional capabilities of each of those areas in a generic way. Don't worry, there's a link at the end, and you can get all these slides. They're all in Visio and Lucidchart and stuff like that, and I'll give them to all you too. But yeah, so that's my picture. But then I use this a lot, because then I can go, well, actually, this is all the stuff you've bought, yeah, and we've bought, and we may or may not be using, right? Okay, well, this is all the stuff we've bought, and this is the stuff we're not using. Is there any value there of actually using forecasting in the organization? Maybe, maybe not. It's included in our licenses. We could use it if we wanted to, yeah? And so therefore, I can start really talking about, and this is a kind of a functional layer, at these different layers, what's going on. But then that could go down to another layer again, to my third level, the real detail, which is kind of really important for actually implementing it. Like, oh, we're not using, say, single sign-on. Okay, but what are the different types of single sign-on that Salesforce supports? And what, would be useful for the organization? Flipping this a little bit is, okay, we're going down the functional capabilities. I said, don't talk about Salesforce. Okay, let's bring it up a bit and actually look at it in kind of 4 different levels, kind of going, well, actually, what are the business goals that you always see in these slides and put up on posters and all this kind of jazz? And then actually, you kind of have the Salesforce at the end, but then how do you connect the goals to what we're implementing, right? And actually, the CEOs and stuff, they just care about that one, yeah? But then actually, what are the business drivers? Well, we want to increase our win rate. We want to increase our order rate. We want to decrease our deal time. These are the kind of things that kind of link to potentially those business goals. And actually, what are we going to be measuring on? How are we going to measure people? And then finally, to achieve all that, what are the functional capabilities that we are actually implementing? Because for me, that's really good, because then if I can implement something and go, hey, look, we said we were going to decrease manual errors, and hey, look, we've just done it, look at the cost saving made. And actually, I was talking to a company, and they were like, yeah, we've got a problem. Our manual errors cost us $500,000. No, it wasn't even $500,000. I think it was near $1 million a year in manual data entry between 2 systems. If you can solve that for less than $500,000 or what it was, grid's in. So like, okay. So yeah, and that's great, because it shows how great you are at the same time. Okay. Also, brilliant communicators, yeah, architects, really kind of communicating well, but also layers are back in, yeah? How do you actually talk to a C-level versus somebody that's a business lead, within an organization, versus the actual users using the system, maybe third parties? It's a different talk. You're talking at different levels, yeah? And actually making sure you're communicating even the stats that you saw at the right level to the right people. The person using Salesforce doesn't care about the global, the big goals at the top of the company, but he's like, well, I need to get my order size up, and what's my, it's targeting the right people in the right way. All good so far? I have no idea how long I'm doing, but we'll keep going. Okay, and next one is storytelling. Who creates great stories? So I grew up in theatre, so I always loved creating great stories. But I think this is the leap from, hey, we want to do this. This is our vision. These are our goals. This is what we want to decrease this churn rate or whatever. This is the Salesforce, how we know how to implement it. But how do you actually connect the two based on the right people that you're talking to in a kind of a good way that starts to convince people that what you're suggesting is correct. Because you get bigger and bigger architectural projects, your architectural design or what you want to implement is potentially going to have larger and larger amounts of money in costs and implementation. And so they want to make sure it's definitely the right approach, right? Or at least you're on the right track. And so they want to be convinced that you know what you're talking about, okay? And this is where I think storytelling comes in and is really important in that process. And actually, I had a chat on one of the podcasts with Gemma about this, and I just wanted to carry on listening to her, right? I can just listen to her for hours on just how she works with companies and that whole sense of value and goals and storytelling that she kind of implements is kind of really cool. So definitely check that one out. But also, who is the master, or who was the master storyteller in tech, do you think? Yeah, Steve Jobs. Yeah. And so the launch of the iPhone, has anybody seen this video? I'm sure loads of people have, right? And he's just like the master. He kind of starts it all off with, a little bit of a hook into what Apple is, creates that build-up of where they've been, where they've come from, and then introduces a little sprinkling of confrontation, right, of what's going on. And he starts talking about that. And then moving on to the climax of this, hey, we've introduced this confrontation. We're now kind of coming to this climax. We're not really giving the game away yet, but you can see everybody's kind of like, okay, I'm really hooked here. And then he kind of literally does the demonstration, the reveal of what it is. And then, right at the end, he comes right back to the problem. Yeah? And from where it all started. And finally, he just neatly wraps it all up. Yeah? Simple, right? Well, Steve didn't reinvent the wheel. He just really, really mastered it, okay? And there's a fantastic video. I'm not going to play it. Has anybody seen What Makes a Hero on TED? I don't know if it's going to play. No, it's not going to play. Yeah. It is an awesome video, and it's basically this guy has gone back in time, or looked at all the historic stories from like the Romans almost, to kind of, and all the myths, and it's kind of figured out the structure of what makes a hero's journey. Yeah, and it's all about this hero's journey of storytelling. And when you watch it, it's like, oh my God, that relates to this book, that story, this story. And it's just all these stories suddenly become this structure that is in this hero's journey. And whenever I'm kind of creating a deck, or ever I'm kind of doing a story, telling a story, I always kind of think back to this kind of hero's journey, maybe not in this presentation, but about, making sure that it's got elements all the way through so that I can create a convincing story of what I want to try and get across. Okay, next one is a learning mindset, okay? And I think this is, if you're here, you're kind of already, I suppose, bought into this, but wanting to learn more, wanting to constantly, do those trailhead trails, but also not even just Salesforce. I see that, the really good architects actually look outside the industry and actually learn all around the outside to really kind of see, well, actually, I don't want to get stuck in the bubble of Salesforce. I really want to understand other technologies or other ways of working, whatever it may be, so I can bring the best bits into the Salesforce world. And actually, it's a bit of a cheat, because it seems like everybody's in this kind of bubble almost in Salesforce. And people go, oh, I found this. This is really cool. I'll bring it in. And everybody's like, wow, that's amazing. It's like, no, it was just nicked from this over here. Yeah. But yeah, a learning mindset. But also, it goes a bit further than that. Yeah. And I think it's not that they just learn, they also teach. Because they've kind of understood that to really know the subject, you've got to be able to kind of teach it in some way. It might not be just standing up and presenting, it might be writing a book, it might be doing it in another way, but having that real deep understanding of the subject, and therefore going on that learning mindset, but also continually learning, continually improving yourself, continually keeping ahead of the game on everything that's coming out. AI, and all that crazy stuff. But also this is another person I was like, oh my God, I just want to listen to you for ages. Does anyone know Carrot? Yeah, okay, she's like, oh my God, I just want to talk to her for 8. She's just amazing, right? Listen to the podcast. She's in Pakistan. She's basically learnt Salesforce. She's then gone out to her community, started teaching them in their community in Pakistan. And, there are challenges in Pakistan for women and learning out, but she's completely now set. She's working for a company in the UK remotely. It's incredible. It's just incredible. Just find her on LinkedIn, have a chat. She's really open. But also, ladies be architects. Yeah, cool. And Admin to Architect that I'm working on at the moment, or have been for the last couple of years. Okay, then we have engaged in the community. So constantly engaged in the community, wanting to learn more, and actually wanting to learn that best practice, wanting to understand what is really going on out there, what is the best ways of using this new technology on this new way, because things are always coming out. And I always think, is there any Salesforce people in the room? Oh, maybe, okay. It's almost quite the way it's kind of very functional, this is how it works, right? But actually relating to those core use cases, or all these core ways of doing this, all these interesting ways of doing stuff, it's just really fascinating. Like I remember when Chatter came out, and it's like, okay, Chatter, great. How do we actually, okay, it seems great. I know it's the right thing, but actually how do you connect it to ways of working and things like that? And I remember there was one company who, basically, they gave Chatter to everybody, and they did music licensing. Not in anywhere in the UK or anywhere, somewhere else. And basically, the venues had to get a music license to play music in the venue, right? And so they basically gave Chatter to all their employees and said, right, if you see a pub that's got an advert in the window doing a DJ night or something like that, just take a photo of it. Yeah, if you're on holiday or whatever, and it goes into Chatter, and they had somebody that kind of checked to see if they had a music license or not. If they didn't, then they'd charge them the license fee, or ring them up and say, hey, look, you really should have a license. They had the evidence of the picture so that they could, or pictures of the venue, so they knew that they were doing it. So for legal and all that, it was fine. And also they gave commission back to the person that first took the photo. And it was actually quite back when, way back when Chatter did first come out. I thought, actually, that's quite a nice, neat little solution for, really showing the value of Salesforce and Chatter. But somebody brought it to a community group, mentioned it. I was like, oh, yeah, so what else could we do that can link, different ideas or different ways of communicating to bring things into the org, to actually kind of elevate the org and how we use Salesforce. So I found that really, really kind of fascinating. Now, this is the next one. It's so difficult. It's iterative agile thinking, but in architecture, right? And this is, so when you think of architecture, it's a big, slow-moving beast usually, right? In this big organization, they know they need to reduce tech debt, so they've kind of got these big architectural plans of how they're going to reduce it and the goals for it. And then we've got at the other end, okay, let's get Salesforce. Oh, MuleSoft, that's cool. Can we get that as well? And start trying to, aligning and being agile and really trying to push the changes through. But then you've got the architecture, slow-moving beast of actually, no, is it in those guidelines that we set you, all these principles and blah, blah, blah. And it's no, but the business just wants it because they need to make change now. And there's this kind of healthy friction in the really good companies between these two, right? But when I think of kind of agile thinking, I kind of think of it as you're trying to you can't predict the future, right? But you're trying to create a plan in a way that gives people these guide rails to follow, but allows them to be free and flexible. So if they hit one of the guide rails, there's a way of quickly going, okay, is this in line with our vision, our goals, our architectural strategy, or actually do we need to twist it a little because the market's changed, right? Because we're always behind the market, right, in architecture. So I think, but having that mindset and being free to say, hey, look, this isn't a lock. I wrote this document a year ago, and this is the way you have to do it, and being more agile to change, I think is a really good kind of thing to have. And also just using artifacts to really show, okay, how things are moving around the organization. Okay, next one. Oh. Trusted and vital advisor. Okay, so I think it's happening right now actually. There's this kind of like progression of you're functional, you can implement Salesforce. Great, I've hired you to implement Salesforce. Awesome, really cool. But actually, you can I want to start moving dial and actually be trusted in the organization so that you trust me in what I'm doing, such that I know actually you say you want that object or you want this way, but actually there's this way that it's going to be better and more efficient for the business. And moving more into this kind of trusted advisor role, right? And once you're in that trusted advisor, they also start to trust you more and maybe start telling you things that maybe they wouldn't tell other colleagues or other people in the organization, especially when Salesforce is concerned. Because it could be, hey, we've got Salesforce, yeah, we want to improve our sales. But what they're not saying is they've got people selling different products in every single part of the country, and they've got 5 people saying 5 different products in Bristol. It is just pointless. They want to train like 2 of them up to do all the product suite, yeah? And actually that's their real goal for using it, and really kind of streamline the learning practice. But they're not going to tell you that because they don't want to get that released into the organization. But moving into that trusted advisor role, you start getting that information that can really help building those architectures and actually starting to consider, okay, that's going to be consolidated. Okay, we're going to have a learning issue. We need to maybe bring the product knowledge maybe into the org to help those people that don't know as much about, the other product sets, for example, or the different types of customers that the other product sets get, and things like that. But what I think is you need to move, to the vital set. Oh yeah, and you never say to your company, I'm a trusted advisor here, aren't I? No, you just keep it to yourself. But the next one is vital, okay? Now, every company does not want to have a vital employee, right? It's like single point of failure, it's a nightmare. For you, pretty good, right? You can, take your own holiday. Don't get any ideas. You can take your own holiday. The holiday rules don't apply to you, right? Because they know the value you bring to the business is so great that they want to keep you on, right? I did a project during COVID, which was literally a 2-week project, yeah? The company was like, they had to fix this challenge in the organization. Salesforce was saying, buy more licenses. App Exchange with partners were going, we've got a solution for you, we've got a solution for you. And they were like, help, what do we do? And their thing was, we need to get out to market as quickly as possible, right? We need to get this problem solved now, right? And so we're like, well, you've got Salesforce, you've got a team of people, it just needs to be aligned in the right way with the goal of we need to deliver quickly. And luckily I did some prep work for them to kind of work on their DevOps strategies and stuff like that. And we basically went, right, Monday morning, we pulled the cord, whole Salesforce operations stopped, everybody swarmed the call, we found the key people that knew the problem domain, they were completely isolated from all other work, everybody knew they couldn't contact them, And we started working the problem, right, with the key people on it. And by the end of the first week, we'd deployed our first experimentation into production. We'd already pre-identified very loyal customers, where if the experience wasn't great, it wouldn't affect them. So targeted those customers. It was, went okay, but yeah. Tweaked it the following week, ironed out the bugs, rolled it across the whole of the organization. They were the first to market in their industry, and it increased their revenue by $500 million. That whole team, you know, they basically it's paid for Salesforce for like 10 years or whatever, right? And now that team is, you know, the comfort blanket, they call it, because it's like, is this the right approach? Should we be doing that? What do you think? And they're just always wanting to make sure that that team, it's the right way, and they're okay with that, because they know that, wow, they must know what they're doing, right? So yeah, I have no idea how long I've got left. I've got 5 minutes. Really? Oh my God, let's keep going. Deep technical knowledge, I think that's a given, okay? In this architect world, but also it's a mile wide, kind of 2 feet deep thing, right? I've really got 5 minutes. Blimey, I think it started late, that's what it was. The well-architected framework. So best practice and well-architected. Who's looked at the well-architected framework? Okay, architect.salesforce.com, developerforce.com, one of those two. Oh, there it is, architect.salesforce. Just learn this. It's a beginning step. They've started doing it. Really learn it and really pull out all the best practice from that site. Just learn it. Just go through it. Because honestly, it's got so much cool stuff in there. I use the lucid chart diagrams, the templates, all the time. Okay, next one. As I've only got 5 minutes, I'm going to whisk the last ones. Futurist. Okay. You are thinking of the future, right? But how do you know what it's going to be? I always think that an architect is somebody that's creating the least worst solution. It's never perfect, yeah? It's always going to change in the future, potentially. And so you're trying to create the least worst solution. And I was talking to one architect who's on the podcast, he will remain nameless, who says, he doesn't actually do it. He's too nervous to do it. He wants to do it, but he's a little bit nervous doing it. If actually delaying the decision as long as possible, because then you have to design the solution for those multiple output results, right? And so by delaying that decision, you're keeping the system as flexible as you can for the future. I don't think I'd do that, but it's an approach, right? But also DevOps, that continual learning. Has everybody know all about DevOps? Has everybody read the Phoenix Project? Yeah, my employees have. I give it out, this book, okay? Just read this book. It's an audio book. It is incredible. It's a storybook on DevOps. It's not a technical manual at all. And it's great. It's based on another book, which I won't go into now, but it is just incredible. But also, I created this for me because I was like, what applications are in the Salesforce ecosystem that support DevOps? And this is like all the stuff I kind of came up with. There's so much stuff in the ecosystem to support that development, planning, monitoring, seeing what's working, what's not, learning, deploying, verifying, continually kind of going around and understanding the security. But also, I think of it as we're shifting left whenever I do DevOps. I'm trying to push the testing and everything as far left as possible, yeah? So if coders are writing stuff or admins are doing stuff in their dev org, literally that night they can be told, actually, your Scratch org has found these issues because you've just put a password. You've created a field called password, and that sounds a little suspect to me. But also, why the hell are you here? You could have just typed in, what are the 10 habits of highly successful architects in ChatGPT? Yeah, and you would have got an answer, right? And they're not too bad. But this is the one that I did in the beginning of the year, and this is the one I did like a week ago. It's like it's getting better and better and better, even as the months go on. Also, has anybody noticed anything in my deck about these images? All AI generated, yeah? I just said, hey, I want a kid surrounded by books and science experiments And, oh, 1 minute. OK, keep going. AI sees things we can't see. I find this amazing. Like retina. Is it male or female? Nobody knows, but AI does. Artificial intelligence predicts the race from their medical images. Insane. Artificial intelligence regulating stroke care in the NHS. So it's basically able to recover from 16 to 48% after a stroke. That's just crazy, right? Oh, we'll skip that one. OK, but I think of AI as this, right? 1900. That is a car there. Everything else is horse-drawn cars. There's the horse-drawn car 13 years later. Whole industry change, right? This is the evolution of the change, and it's because it's not linear, right? It kind of goes, whee! It might have started then, and you can see over time, it's getting quicker and quicker and quicker. AI, like every app now has got some kind of AI element in. It's mental. I'm going to skip that. What is it? Right, OK, I've basically gone through all my 10 architecture things, and I've gone, OK, if I could create a scorecard that measures people on each of the different domains of what I think a Salesforce architect is, how you convince stakeholders, how you create architecture visions, how do you really understand the customer, and things like that, I've kind of boiled it into a scorecard. It fills it all out, and it kind of gives some advice at the end. So I'm going to kind of improve on it, but if you sign up to that as well, I'll send you all the slides and all the models and stuff I've done on here as well. Oh, I'll leave it up there. But yeah, thank you. That is it. Oh, yes. Also, if you want to talk about AI and careers and the development change, we've got a collaboration chat in the collaboration tent straight after this. So I'm going to head down there, because I'll be quite interested on what you think changes in Salesforce are going to happen. Because with Einstein GPT, it's going to automate a lot of what we do. And we need to move from being functional creators into that trusted advisor and becoming, I think, those kind of architects of really architecting change in organizations. So I'll be down there in about 5 minutes.